Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Lead Her podcast. Today we have got Gemma Blaumure. Welcome, Gemma.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So Gemma is the women's health mentor, and I actually found out about Gemma through my partner Joe, and he came down the stairs one day and he's like, I'm working with this new lady, Gemma. She's amazing. She would be awesome for your podcast. Like, you guys are like proper, like pro women. Like, you need to get her on the podcast. And I was like, okay, cool. So I've been watching Gemma for a while, and the message that she's putting out there is amazing. And like, the conversation is changing. We are definitely talking a lot more about our periods and how to manage our periods around training. We're definitely talking a wee bit more about pre and postnatal training, and menopause is no more like hush hush and Instagram and stuff now. Definitely people are talking about these things a lot more, but the fitness industry is definitely still a lot more created for men, let's say. And I think the world is in general, and it's great the conversation is improving, but I still don't think it's at a level that it should be. And I was speaking to Gemma last week, and it's like, we need to chat about this all a hell of a lot more, and just giving you guys a bigger insight into like how you maybe could be training and like managing your nutrition better to kind of maybe suit you a little bit more. And like, Gemma's on a really cool mission to help women understand themselves more through helping other coaches coach their clients better. So she's on an awesome mission right now that I'm like, right, let's just chat this all out today and see if it helps you guys at home listening in any way. That's amazing. Or even just helping you become aware of who Gemma is and what she's doing, and following her moving into the future as well, and everything that you're doing. So Gemma, what else can you tell everyone else about you personally and professionally as well? Who are you?
Okay, that was a big introduction. How do I follow that? So yeah, I have been a PT for more than 20 years now, and a health coach, specifically women's health, probably just about 10 years. It's definitely, my personal journey has always flavoured my professional journey, if you like. I'm not really one to settle for no if it doesn't suit like my needs. So, I had my first baby, well, he'll be 12 in December, and I was determined that I would just carry on as normal. There would be no difference. Like, remember my boss's horror when I came in to teach Body Attack, and my due date was the Wednesday and this was the Tuesday night. He was like, why are you still here? Oh my God, you're going to have a baby while you're in the studio. So, I was like, nah, this won't change me. I am not prepared to settle for being bubble wrapped and like sat in the house and not being able to do what I always wanted to do. It still frustrates me a little bit now that mums can't just go anywhere with their baby in a car seat and get back to what they used to do. Active mums, and there's not an awful lot for active women to continue their active life throughout the different stages of the female health journey. As far back as puberty, like I was in an elite performance pathway for athletes, and not once was periods mentioned, or that there might be a difference between the girls and the boys in the pathway and how they might need coached differently or emotive topics dealt differently. Then obviously when you go through pregnancy, if you decide to go down that path, there's not an awful lot of guidance. We're better now, but pre and postnatal fitness is still gen pop, is still really generic, and lots of coaches don't really want to go there. They're either all in or not at all. And then when I've now had 3 children, and after my third, he's 3.5 now. Obviously we went through the pandemic as well, and I was like, I completely lost all my strength, all my joints seized up, and I went to the GP and she was like, oh, it's because the gyms are shut. And I was like, that's not, because I've done this for 20 years. Like there's something not right. So then went on a deep dive as to what it could be, discovered the word perimenopause. Like I had never even considered, didn't even know that word existed. I thought menopause was for old ladies. never in my wildest dreams did I think that potty training and perimenopause would occur in the same part of my life, but they very much did. And then I was like, wow, there's nothing for us in this space. There's some Gen Pop information that's not particularly helpful, but there's nothing for women like me who want more than do your 10,000 steps and settle for what you've got, So now I'm on a mission. Now I have gone from, I think I said this to you when we spoke before, there's a journalist called Kate Muir who did Davina's programme, and she says that when she got into this space, she was a consumer of information. She was just learning what she needed to do the work that she was doing. And when she learned more, she was horrified at what she learned, and she became a feminist because she was like, this has got to change. And then the more she learned, she became an activist because she was like, how do we make it change if we're not in it to make it happen? And that's definitely what's happened to me. I consumed information for my own benefit and then realised how wide the gap of knowledge was for women, and became a feminist, having never thought of myself as a feminist before, because I've never felt hard done by. I've always been one of those women or girls who was like, if he can, I can. Like, that's not going to stop me. And then, yeah, definitely, I'm probably sitting in the activist camp now, banging my drum saying it's not good enough. We must do better. We can do better. We just need to know how.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So what are we doing like now to kind of become like that activist? Like, what are you kind of seeing within your business to be like, right, I want to do something about this and help more women? What have you been kind of actioning?
So up until this year, I've really worked with women themselves directly, but there's only one of me. So I thought, this industry is, although it was an industry built by men for men, and women have been on the end of that shrink it and pink it model for, well, forever, the tide is turning, and there are more and more coaches, trainers, PTs, fit pros that want to make a difference. So I gathered everything I've learned, condensed it down into the female specific curriculum, and have been taking it out to those fit pros, coaches, teachers that just need confidence in their own knowledge to start having those conversations with women and empowering women to know themselves better. I read a stat the other day that was something like 74% of women are described as woefully, that's the word that the researchers used, woefully uneducated in their own health and well-being.
Yeah, still to this day, when we think it's getting a little bit better, and it isn't. It really is.
I mean, I think the more you don't know what you don't know, do you? And then the more you learn, the more you realise you've got to learn, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Like I say, I'm a 39, nearly 40-year-old woman who, until recently, didn't even understand the phases of my own menstrual cycle. Do you know, like, I was like, yeah, I'll track my cycle, that's easy. But I didn't. Do you know, like, I couldn't have told you. In fact, so we had assisted conception for our second two children, and part of the process was knowing when day one of your cycle was, and I didn't actually know, and I was 30, that day one was the first bleeding day, like first full bleed. So anything up until actual bleed is not day one. Do you know, like, that was how uninformed I was, and I thought I was really in tune and connected with my body, and but I just didn't know. And then I didn't even know the word perimenopause existed until I was 37, and I'd had 3 kids, one of which is a girl. And I was like, wow, my knowledge gap is massive, and I'm a female living it. So imagine trying to help women understand themselves if you're a man. And there's a stat that says that 70% of coaches and fitness professionals are men. So where do they start if they don't know? And the biggest barrier to having those conversations is the trainer's own confidence in what they know. So yeah, my mission is to help them feel confident in what they know, to have the conversations with the women that they work with, so that those women are empowered within their own health and well-being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're not just training them like little men.
Yeah, exactly. They're not just given the same kind of things, but less reps and lighter weights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because there's better ways, and there's better ways for menopausal women to train effectively and efficiently than premenopausal women, for example.
mm-hmm.
Do you know what? And once you know the client that you're working with and you understand where she is in her female health journey, you can provide a more tailored service and get better results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then it's also helping, like you said, there's only one of you. There's only so many women that you can help. That
Exactly.
It's like now the mission is like, if I help lots of other coaches and there's more women out there getting the help that they deserve, not that they need, that they deserve that help. And it's like when they are trained like many men and they can't do it, they then feel like they're a failure. They then resent any fitness and health advice. They feel like it just doesn't work for them and they're broken, and they're not. They're just not being trained in a certain way that manages their hormones or their mood or their lack of sleep through like night sweats and stuff that can kind of happen, like all these things. Like we are so different to men, and some people see that as a bad thing, but I think it's also a very interesting thing, and we can help it work in our favor in some ways as well, can't we?
Oh, definitely. You just have to know what you're working with, and if your client doesn't understand herself, then both of you are at a loss. You know, neither of you know really where to start. But if you're both working together to understand each individual client that you have in front of you and how their circumstances affect what they can and can't do with you, then you build a much more authentic relationship with every client. And we know that women thrive within the relationship. So if they feel confident in you, even if they're not confident in themselves, then they will still be willing to be vulnerable, to share, to set goals, to be in the vulnerable place of trying to achieve a goal, because they're confident in you and your relationship with them. So it makes a massive difference. And yeah, it can completely change the playing field for women.
And it probably makes it more enjoyable for the coach as well to be like, okay, like I actually understand why someone's like, why we're having this difficulty, like here's problems that we can solve it, rather than being like, oh, like that client's not getting. Even then they can then doubt themselves and be like, maybe I'm a crap coach and I can't give people results. And I think it's really good within their business if they can help everyone through these emotions and these changes, that it promotes their business and helps them grow as a coach as well, because they're giving people the help that they deserve.
Oh, definitely. And alongside like looking for answers for myself, I've got 3 clients that stick in my mind from that particular time in my life and my business, that we were jumping through every hoop that I knew and nothing was working. Like they were independent of each other, but it was at the same time. And I was like, it's me. Like I'm crap. There's something that like, I don't know. I'm just rubbish. And I remember saying to one of them, it can't just be about the squats and the broccoli. Like there must be something bigger at play. I just don't know what it is, but like I have given you all my golden nuggets and none of them are showing any reward, you know? So you're absolutely right. Not only can it take women from feeling like they're rubbish and it must be them because they're not getting the same results as someone else that they've seen in before and after pictures, but it also supports coaches themselves from feeling like they're rubbish. Do you know, it takes everybody to a more empowered, informed place.
Yeah, absolutely. And some people will listen to this and go, oh, well, all coaches, like everyone puts coaches on a pedestal as if we're so confident and we know everything and we're like bossing it and we're so motivated. But honestly, I have had times where I've thought I'm a bad coach and I feel like
Yeah.
I'm not good enough, and I've thought I can't help these people, what's wrong with me? But then there's the people at home that's like, what's wrong with me? I can't
Yeah.
And it's really good to just open that conversation together. And sometimes I'd be sitting with clients and I'm like, look, I've, like you said, I've done everything that I think of. Is there anything you feel on your side that would maybe help as well, so that we can kind of find a solution together to keep moving you forward, because you're doing amazing, and just trying to reinforce that it's
Yeah.
not them, you know, it's so hard. So I think it's amazing that you're doing this. So through this course, do we kind of start from puberty, I guess? Or do you kind of
Yeah.
take
Well, so we kind of go through the differences between men and women as basic as the skeleton,
Mhm.
and like the impact that us having wider hips has on women's ability to squat, do you know, further down the line, or women being more prone to non-contact ACL injuries, which has been quite topical with women's football. But that's not a phenomenon that's only football related. That's actually because we have wider hips and our leg bones are further apart. Breasts, pelvic floor, pelvic floor muscles, and how women's brains work a little bit differently. So they're not necessarily, you couldn't look at two brains and say that's a man's brain, that's a women's brain. But how we process emotion differently and perceive emotion differently and how we deal with it differently versus men. So we're quite external with it, men are quite internal with it. If you're a female working with a man or a man working with a female, sometimes that can cause conflict because women are empathetically wired and men are problem focused. So I actually think I've heard Joe talk about this, that he is a problem solver and he wants to solve your problems, and you're like, fuck off, I don't want you to solve it, I just want you to listen. And that's the difference in our brains. So if you're a male coach trying to work with a female who just wants to tell you how she's feeling, their default is to try and fix that.
Mhm.
And women don't often want to be fixed, they just want to be heard.
Mhm.
So yes, basic differences is that. And then we follow the female health cycle. So we go puberty, menstrual cycle, menopause, and then tools for integration and implementation. I don't cover pre and postnatal because there's quite a lot of that out there already. And not every female client will be pre or postnatal, but every female client will follow the female health journey, otherwise puberty and menopause.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's where we go with that.
Mhm.
And I get on my soapbox.
That's really interesting that you don't do the pre and postnatal stuff, but that makes total sense because not everybody's going to go through that cycle. Like those other ones are guaranteed for everybody. And like we always say, like I remember when I was younger, like menopause was like a bad thing. And it
Yeah.
was like you would whisper it and it would be like, oh, she's going through menopause. Like you wouldn't really, it felt like something that was bad and scary and dark. That's all I remember as a kid, like growing
Yeah.
up. Even as like maybe early 20s, I'd always be like, oh, bit creepy or yucky or
Like
whatever.
women are on the turn.
Yeah. And it's just like, I don't know why I was even bringing that up there, but it's just like you think these things are bad and that women, like you've got a choice with it. You don't have a choice with it. It happens, it's normal, it's natural. That why is it so, like, why was it so hush hush and dark? And I just feel sorry for my mum, like to go through all of that with us as kids and not knowing how we could have maybe helped more ourselves as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really good that it is something that you're helping men with as well, to open this conversation and not be funny about it. Like I've still got family members who see my Instagram and I'm talking about my period and they're like, why are you talking about your period on Instagram? And I'm like, because I'm talking to women, I'm not talking to
Yeah.
you. Like this isn't for you. It's like literally helping women hear these things, to go, it's not just me that has a really crap week before my period. It's quite normal, and to know that you're going to get the weeks after that you're like super strong and super powerful.
Yeah.
And you just feel like super mum on those weeks as well. You get the good weeks, you get the bad weeks, and it's all through this hormonal cycle. But we think we're mental and there's something wrong with us, and then we get our period and we go, oh, maybe that's
Yeah.
what.
Oh, exactly. But then, do you know, I think everything along the female specific, everything all comes shrouded in that veil of embarrassment. Do you know, we talk about pelvic floors and like people just settle for peeing themselves. And I'm like, you don't have to though. Like there are ways and means of not being like that, or not worrying when you sneeze, or coughing with confidence, do you know? And then periods, we've almost been taught that it's a monthly inconvenience. And actually, it's so important. It's considered the 5th vital sign of internal health. So if you are of menstruating age, a healthy monthly cycle lets you know your body's operating optimally internally without any other feedback. And slight changes in that are markers that it's not in optimal health anymore. And there are things, you know, and it's actually worth looking and seeing, where could you optimize health? What are you really stressed? Are you really tired? Are you eating well enough? Do you know, there's lots of things then that you can start thinking about that are not major changes that would probably go under the radar otherwise. And then, yeah, like you say, with menopause, I actually think it's quite a liberating time for women if they're not scared of it, and they don't see themselves as past it. It's almost, you know, a step into freedom of the responsibilities and duties that potentially come during your childbearing years, do you know? And you've got so much more to give. Plus, you've got a wealth of experience behind you that if you know how to manage your health and your symptoms and get yourself to that optimum place of health and not settle for aching joints and rage, because you don't have to, because there's loads of options, even if HRT is not your thing. You just need to know. And that's, I think, there's that big knowledge gap that women don't know, and they've been too embarrassed to say, I've not slept for 5 months because I'm so hot and sweaty through the night I can't sleep. Or, do you know, like I had moments of like my life was on slow motion in front of me. And I was like, oh, don't say that. Oh, don't be ragey like that. Oh, we're doing it. Oh, we've done it. Oh, well, like we'll just have to ride that wave then. Do you know?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's like what you kind of said earlier, like you don't know what's kind of going on with your own body, and there wasn't that information out there for you when you were kind of experiencing it. You can feel really lonely.
Yeah.
And
I think the whole thing can, you know, women who suffer with their menstrual cycle feel really lonely because they feel like no one understands them. Or, do you know, being a new mum can be one of the loneliest times of your life, because not everybody in your social circles had a baby. Your husband, his life never changes. He just gets up and goes away. All his clothes still fit him, goes away and does his thing. And you're like, wow, I've got this tiny baby that's crying and my clothes fit me and I'm leaking from every possible orifice, do you know, like, and I'm quite sad and lonely. And then menopause can be quite lonely when women are like, I've had more than 5 or 6 clients who thought they had dementia because their cognitive function was so badly affected. And they'd got themselves into a place where they'd just written off the next 20 years because they were like, right, I've got dementia, that's it. Life's over. And then they got the right help and they were like, wow, I've not got dementia. I'm actually totally fine. But, you know, if they hadn't spoken to me, they'd never have known. And they'd just have like signed off the rest of their life to being unable to participate in life fully.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's just the generational thing as well, like where we have just been like, I'm just going to go like do what the boys do. Like I am the same and I can push, and we just get on with it and we just try and do it no matter the barriers that we all face. We're just trying to do it like the boys and show the boys how it's done. And I don't know if that stems into all these other aspects of life where we're like, I'll just get on with it. I'll just deal with it. I'll deal with the leakage. It's fine. It's normal. Let's not talk about it. Just deal with it. We just try and deal. Whereas actually there's things out there that actually could help us and make our life easier. And
we don't have to settle.
No.
Yeah. I've said that quite a few times that when I've been talking about menopause in particular. If it was a man thing, you'd get HRT like you get Lemsip, because they wouldn't settle for being sweaty, being mildly incontinent, being ragey, not having sleep, suffering with brain fog and cognition problems, Like I always say, I've got a degree in education, which is pretty much a degree in known names. And I couldn't for the life of me remember words or people's names, or sometimes my own name. Do you know, like trying to get one of the kids, we've got 3 kids and 2 dogs, and I'd be through all 5 names before I got the right person. Resorted to shouting, "Hey!" and then I'll be like, "What?" Do you know? So yeah, if it was a man thing, it wouldn't be shrouded in the mystery that it is, because they just wouldn't settle. But we're our own worst enemy, because we just power through. Women just power through. They just get on with it because they have to. And while that does what it needs to keep things going, I think it's very much slowed progress, because we haven't talked about it. We've just powered through and kidded ourselves that it was normal and it would be fine.
I feel like
fine's not good enough.
Yeah, it's not. And I think I said this to you before, but I do feel like a little bit of social media has helped and opened up more discussion, because we're not just in our own little friendship group where there's 5 or 4 of us and we maybe talk a little bit, but then we may not talk because we're so busy with kids and everything else that you never get a chance to have those deep conversations. Like, I'm struggling. But now when we're on social media and you do have those people that go, fuck it, I'm going to talk about this. And they talk about it. And so many people are like, oh my God, like I have these symptoms. Like, it's not just me. And it makes people feel understood. Like, I feel like that's had a huge benefit, whereas I don't think if we didn't have social media, there wouldn't be people that could get that platform to spread this message, like people like yourself, to be able to like help coaches know that there is now a platform that they can come to, that they can learn more to help coach their female clients more. So like, we're going to go into like some other stuff really soon in terms of like how people can understand their bodies a wee bit more. We could talk for hours like, so much stuff and try and put the world to right on camera. But one thing I really wanted to just chat to you a little bit, we can try and go into this briefly, is like, there is so little research on women in the fitness industry. Can you explain maybe like why that is?
Part of it is that science needs clear factors and variables, and no 2 women are the same. No 2 humans are the same, but you know, you take 10 menstruating women, for example, and they're all on a different day of their period, or even if they were all on the same day of their cycle, their hormonal profile would be completely different. So those variables change the goalposts for the scientific outcome. It's much easier to use men because they don't have those wide varied hormonal profiles, and they can keep those variables the same. So when they're trying to prove an outcome, they can very, very clearly state, you know, that the hormone cycle didn't impact the result. And then you've got the ethics for women as well. You know, you've got the potential of being pregnant, and that makes getting the ethics part of your science research more difficult to achieve. And then you've got the physical differences as well. Do you know what? This is quite generic, but do you know, if you chose 10, 25-year-old men, for example, they're not going to have massively different bodies if they all, you know, say you took a football team, 15, or that's a rugby team, 15 guys, they will be different because of rugby team. Let's go a football team, 10, 11 guys. They're all relatively the same. You know, like their body makeup's quite the same, but you take 10 female football players and you've got different breast size for a start, you know, to take into consideration alone. So yeah, body shape and body type is more variable, I think, for men and women. So the short answer is it's easier to do science research on males than it is on females.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So even medical research is the same. And there's, like, I was horrified to find out that they just, with medicine, largely just shrink the dose that they would give to men for women. But there are some drugs that were found to be dangerous because women have a different fat profile to men, and the absorption rate was different because of the fat profile. So actually the dose became dangerous for women. And I think one of the drugs was like an antihistamine, do you know, like, but just that shrink it and pink it version was then actually problematic for women. I think there was a heart medication as well. Whereas we know, do you know, like the symptoms of a heart attack even for men and women are totally different. But we've only really been taught to recognise a heart attack in men. It's that whole powering through thing, because women tend not to be like, oh, my chest, oh God. They just get on with it, whereas men are like, oh, I'm dying. I sound like a man here. I totally don't. Got two sons and a husband, do you know? But I do feel like women have been shortchanged
massively
across the science R&D field.
Yeah, and I think it's that backlog as well, is like it was a lot more men and stuff that were in fitness industry as well, that it kind of stemmed there. And some research is really old as well.
Yeah.
Is like for men back in like maybe like the 60s, 70s, 80s, and now we're in 2020. I seen a meme recently, and it was like 2023, people born in 2000 are now 23, but I'm 23. How like, do you know that way? Because I feel as if it's only been, I don't know, I'm like, how are they 23 already? Like the years of in research that's 40, how much has technology changed with iPhones and stuff since like the early 2000s, that it's like we're still going by research in like the 1998 and stuff, and it's like that's
exactly
go, and things have changed massively. So I think there's a huge backlog with like a more male dominated area, and now it is becoming a bit more balanced. It definitely is, but it's so hard to research on women because of all these different fundamentals. Like, I know you don't have the answer to that in any way, but what should we maybe be aware of, like with maybe when we do see research coming out, maybe like for me, I seen something on a newspaper recently, and when I went through and read it, it was all done on men, and I was like, well, still that doesn't.
And a lot of the research where it states that it's men and women, the split's like there's a woman in the research, you know, it's not 50-50. If you're really interested in the science, there's 3 women who've written a book called The Female Body Bible, and they go by the Well HQ, Emma Ross, Baz Moffat and Bella Smith, and they are pioneering female specific education being brought into sport and exercise. Baz was a rower, I think, and I forget if it was Emma or Bella, but one of them was the head of research for 2 Olympic cycles for Team GB. Do you know? So the other one's a female health doctor, and they share a lot of well done research. So through their website, if you're a science boffin like me and you like to read the research and you like to see what's out there, that's a good place to start. And then read the blurb and see one of the problems with a lot of research that has had women only, it's not very good quality research, so it doesn't stand up to peer review or meta-analysis, you know, the things that researchers use to say this is gold standard research. But there is a lot coming out, and there's a lot of pioneering female scientists in the sport and exercise world who are doing a lot of good work. Stacey Sims is an American, and she did a lot of work with, her first book was it called Roar? Was the first book Roar or the second book Roar? One of them anyway was working with your menstrual cycle, and then the second one was menopause related. And her team do a lot of work, and she cites a lot of good research. So yeah, there's lots of stuff out there or drip feeding into the market now. Hazel Wallace, the food medic, she's another one that she's got a female specific health book now, and she shares a lot of stuff that's good quality research into women's health.
Yeah, we'll maybe write them down after the podcast and pop them in the description. But I love the food medic. She's amazing. Like, I love what she's doing. And I think as well, like, just to quickly note, is that, like you said, it is harder to do women. That's the main thing. It's just going to be harder and it will take longer, but you could still get kind of research there, and hopefully we do see that change in the future. But also stuff like, even just like gym equipment, a lot of it's designed for the average man. Like I've tried to put women on leg press and stuff before, and they're teeny, they're like
Yeah.
like just below 5 foot, and I'm like, oh, like this is not going to fit our limbs. Like it's just sometimes realizing some kit is big and bulky, and a lot of it has been designed for men as well, and we maybe need to adapt things a little bit to kind of get
Oh,
it to
definitely.
you. So yeah, it's just really interesting to know that these things, again, there's nothing wrong with you, it's just things
Yeah.
happen a lot more.
Even bike saddles, the groove in a bike saddle is to protect the nerves in like men's, like, I'm not sure about their scrotum, but definitely like their undercarriage anyway. That's what the groove is there to protect. And you're like, wow, you thought about a man when you made the saddle, but what about us? Do you know, like, how come the mainstream saddle is to protect men? Like, what? Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah, and you see so many like professional athletes like suffering from that
Yeah.
pelvic floor and stuff because we're so into, like, I think they've not even changed the saddle really 100% yet for mainstream
Oh,
women and men. So yeah, I think it's just good to bring awareness to that for sure, because a lot of people don't really realize that unless you
yeah.
are in the fitness industry. So thank you for sharing that with us. Now we know everybody's different, so we can't give people the answers today of what's going to be perfect for them, but we know like most women listening to this podcast are maybe mums, they've maybe been through menopause, but they're definitely women who are really busy. So we kind of thought like, okay, maybe we can look for stuff that women that are really highly stressed, maybe struggling with their sleep, maybe got a lot going on in life, like what maybe kind of considerations would you maybe put in for those kind of women to have a healthier lifestyle?
So planning and prepping would probably be my like biggest thing. I know certainly for myself, when I consciously plan in training, nutrition, and recovery for the coming week, I'm far more likely to make that happen than if I just like see what happens. You know, by the time I see what happens, it's bedtime on a Friday night and I've not done anything. And then I'm like, God, I'm such a miserable cow because I haven't exercised and I've eaten shit because I was eating on the run and didn't actually take time to look after myself. Whereas a couple of hours over the weekend can really change how a week goes for me. And like, I even plan like what washing gets done on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you know, like what things have to happen in the house, what things have to happen for the kids, what meals we're having, because like I saw a meme the other day where someone was saying the worst thing that nobody tells you about having kids is you've got to decide what they have for tea for the next 18 years. Like it's one of my biggest, like I could sit in the supermarket and sob sometimes when I'm like, I don't want to have to think about what to make people for dinner, only for one of them to be like, oh, this is great. One of them to be like, I don't like this, or oh, we're having this again, do you know? And I'm like, ah. Or and then you say, well, what do you want for tea? And they're like, so we've got a cookbook cupboard, and I'm like, choose a book each, choose a meal each. And when you have that meal, you have to take ownership for the fact that you chose it, even if it's not what you fancy and you don't like it that night. Make a better choice next week. And yeah, I do the same with exercise. So what I'm going to do each day and when I'm going to do it, because like this morning, I got up and did my own workout early morning because it's the only time I can fit it in. And I was like, I might get it in the afternoon, but that might becomes never, because then I've got kids at home and they want things and the dogs need walked, you know, like, so planning and prepping, definitely number one tip. Don't scrimp or overlook recovery. That I've found, I don't know if you find that with your clients, but that's the first thing that goes when clients are busy, is their recovery days or their active recovery or their 5 minutes of mindfulness each day, you know, like the things that they're like, well, that's not my workout, so it doesn't count, so I'll just miss that out. Whereas actually, if you're stressed and you're busy, exercise, although it's good, it's still stress on stress. And there's only so much that your body can take and your mind can take. But if you actively build in active recovery days, it doesn't have to be nothing, that can be your walk day or your swim day or your yoga day, but don't scrimp on them, and don't scrimp on the hour before bed, killing your screen time and the wind down, or the, even if it's only 5 minutes, they say if you've only got time for 20 minutes meditation a day, you should do 40. Do you know? So meditation might not be your thing, but for me, I'd like to say I meditate every day, but I don't. But I do always have a coffee quietly myself in my egg chair every morning. Like, that's a non-negotiable for me. And my husband's always like you could save yourself 15 minutes if you didn't do that. I'm like, no, but those are the important 15 minutes. I'd actually rather not wash my hair. So yeah, don't scrimp on that. And then probably the biggest one, well, actually I'll leave that because I think that might lead us on to the next question that you want to ask me. Learn how to train effectively for where you are. So there's no point knocking your pan in with hundreds of hours of cardio if that's not actually going to get you where you want to go. So if you are busy, if you are stressed, if you're not entirely sure about what training you need to be doing for where you are in your life journey and what your goals are, get help and learn how to do it effectively, because you'd be amazed what you can do in half an hour if you know what you're doing and you know why you're doing it, than if you just aimlessly, put a 60-minute workout in and you spend too long resting or not enough time resting, or you're doing loads of hypertrophy training and actually some shorter, really heavy sets would be better, So yeah, learn how to do it effectively and efficiently, and that will make it much easier to program in and stick to.
Yeah, and these things, like you've said, are so easy not to do, like especially the prep in for the week. They're easy to do, but they're easy to not to do. And I say that's sometimes the hardest things that you need to kind of stick to. So one thing quickly, I love that you get the kids to help, because that definitely gives you some decisions you don't need to make, which is amazing, and they take responsibility for that. I love that idea. And then second one, what was the second one again? Your efficiently. No, what was your second one?
Don't scrimp recovery.
Yeah, recovery, love that as well. And even just like those little things, like those little bit of meditations. But one thing we sometimes do with ladies that are really busy is, like, when you get home and before you go in the house, just sit in the car. Or even just when you're driving home, put the radio off, because it's just noise. You get in the house, it's noise. It's like, just drive home with no sound. And I know you might listen to this podcast when you're driving, and that's great, but try and give yourself those wee moments of just pure silence. Like, it doesn't need to be you like sat cross-legged in front of the household, like meditation and humming and eyeing. It could just be like silence. And I find that sometimes I come up with my best ideas and like really clear my head when I'm in the car by myself and no music, nothing. I'm like, oh, I've got that answer to that thing. Like, it helps me hugely. So even things like that, or just before you go in the house, or just before you go into work, just sit for a couple of minutes and just breathe. Like,
I think that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I love that as well. I'm just like, just stop for those wee seconds, because when you go in that house, you are on demand to everybody else. Just take a couple of seconds before you grab all your stuff and you head in the house. So I just want
to... definitely. I used to I always get shopping delivered when I can now to save time, but like, see, going around the shops, I used to put earphones in, but they weren't playing anything, just so nobody spoke to you. Like, and that was like my quiet time, and then I would have 10 minutes in the car with a treat that I'd got myself and nothing before I drove home, because it was like, decompress. So yeah, definitely, I love that.
There's little things in it that just, the simple things make us happy.
Oh, I know.
Brilliant, I love that. So with your next question, we're out of time, so we'll see what we can do, but how could we maybe help women start to kind of understand themselves more and their bodies more? How can we help them understand?
So getting them to know they're normal, no matter where you are in life. If you don't already do it, start tracking your cycle now, today, and make a note of what's normal. What does normal look, sound, and feel like for you? So, like I told you about me, like ranting and raving at my family and being like, what is going on? Like, that's not what normal sounds like from me. Do you know, I'm actually the friend you want in a crisis, because I'm quite there. It takes a lot to kind of fluster me. You know, I'm like, oh, his legs hanging off. It's fine. We'll be fine. Do you know, like I really am quite a calm, level-headed person, and I really wasn't for a while. And then, do you know, what does normal feel like? Are you anxious, or are you quite a calm person? What does it look like? So if you're, for example, how long do you bleed for? Is it 5 days? Is it 7 days? Is it 2 days? Are you hot? Are you cold? Do you know, like, is your hair thinning? Are your nails brittle? What does your skin look like? Have you got breakouts? Do you get cramps? Do you get headaches? Do you crave chocolate? All those kind of things are little snippets of information, whispers that your body gives you to tell you what normal is. And when you know what normal is, it's that forewarned is forearmed. You then know when things are not normal, and you hear the whispers without your body having to shout at you and stop you in your tracks and say what you're doing is not working. And that is relevant whether you're just very stressed or very busy, or whether you're perimenopausal, wherever you are in life. If you know what normal looks, sounds, and feels like for you, then you know when it's not normal. And also you can work with normal. So you know when lifting heavy works really well, or when getting a walk with earphones with no noise works, do you know, or when no training is actually a good thing and not a bad thing, or when you can push hard and, you know, you've got loads of energy and loads of power and you can really smash your sessions. Once you understand what normal is for you, you can work much more effectively and efficiently within that. And you are aware when it's not normal, and you can seek the appropriate support or advice, be that from a coach, a PT, a doctor, whatever it is that you actually need. But you know when you need it. And you don't get to the point that I did, where like I was completely blown out the water and it was like I was wearing someone else's body, because I just hadn't listened. When I look back, and quite often when I look back with clients and we, you know, kind of do a timeline, they're like, oh, wow, yeah, I did notice those things, but I was just like, nah, do you know, it's fine, because I didn't know what normal for me was. And I could only go with what mainstream normal was. And mainstream normal is that whole Gen Pop, like everything's fine. So yeah, that's the best thing I think that women can do to support themselves. And they can start now. And it doesn't cost anything, and they don't need anyone to do it. And you can do it on an app, or if you're an old school paper diary girl like me, you can note it in your diary. But you'll soon see a pattern, and you'll soon learn the rhythm of your body if you don't already.
And some people are like, oh, well, I already do that, but they don't. Like they've maybe like been in the app for like one day and then totally discarded it, because we are busy, like life is non-stop. But I do think it is really important to start getting averages of yourself. Like I know for me, my period will be maybe kind of 4 days, like around there, like always. And like sometimes if it's shorter, I'm like, oh wow, that's a bit weird, that's strange. And it's just little things like that go a long way. And sometimes this is why it is good to have a coach as well, because it does bring that awareness back to you. Like one thing that you say as well is like when women work with you, they know themselves more than they ever have done before. That's similar to what we do on Lead Hard as well. Like I've had so many women come to me going, my period doesn't really affect me. And I'm like,
but does it?
I noticed within a week it does, definitely. Like week 1, they're so motivated. They're like, I'm so tired. I don't know what's wrong with me. And I'm like, where are you in your cycle right now? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, that's maybe something that we can use as a tool while we're coaching you, that if you're having a bad week, we can maybe kind of look into these things and help you understand yourself more, and why you're hungry and why you're tired and why you're grumpy. And also one thing for me last week, or this week, was it this week? Yeah, this week, Monday, had a bit of a low sore back. My lower back gets a bit sore when I've got my period, and I'll always be like, I'm not deadlifting. Like, it's just not worth it on those days when I've already got a bit of aching pain to then be deadlifting. So there's so many things that are so powerful to know about yourself, that for when you are going through menopause or when life does changes, you can really kind of get a grasp of what's going on, and that's not normal for you. So
Exactly. And if your body's working really hard behind the scenes, so they say the second half of your cycle is when your body, it's like the prep phase. So even though you're not planning on having a baby, it's preparing you to have one in case you do. So it's using, that's when you're generally seeking out those extra calories because it's working so hard behind the scenes, and then you pile more work and stress on top of that, and then you're like, God, I'm shit, I'm just shit. But if you're like, oh, actually, behind the scenes, out with my control, there's huge energy expenditure. So actually, I'm not going to stay up and watch that program. I'm going to make an effort to go to bed a bit earlier, and I'm going to drink more water, and I'm not going to berate myself for having a Kit Kat at 4 o'clock because, you know, I just need that little pick me up, and I'm going to get more fresh air. You can start to work with your body instead of being like, God, I'm so shit, I hate myself.
yeah. Do you know another one I want to just drop in briefly as well is like alcohol? I think a lot of women with even their cycle or through menopause is like alcohol affects you differently.
Oh, yeah.
It does. And if you're already feeling the emotions of anxiety, even coffee actually. So on Sunday, I said to Joe, I feel like I've got a wee bit of like anxiety for this week ahead, like just got a lot on and I'm thinking a bit more and there's loads going on. And I was like, Joe would say to me later, he's like, do you want another coffee? And I was like, I would love one because I've got a lot to do. But I already felt anxious that I knew another coffee was going to take me over the edge. And that sounds so pathetic, but it's little things like that I know about myself. I can only handle one coffee.
Yeah.
Stays, but if I'm anxious, then one is definitely enough. And I think alcohol's the same. I've noticed with myself, like because I drink a lot less, I think as well. But yeah, if I'm already feeling a bit blue, that's normally when people would turn to alcohol to maybe feel better, to maybe feel relaxed. If people are having a tough week at work and they're having that brain fog and they're like, what's wrong with me? Maybe a glass of wine or a bottle of wine will be there to go to relax the weekend. But then that's causing more brain fog. Then that's causing more tiredness. Then that's causing more relationships with food, that hunger, that exhaustion. You just eat and kind of feel better. That it's noticing stuff like this affects
breaking those cycles.
Yeah, it affects you hugely with menopause and period, I think.
Yeah, and alcohol, I've had a couple of clients who are like, oh no, I have to have a glass of wine or I can't sleep. I need it to help me go to sleep. And I'm like, alcohol is actually a sedative. So if you're sedated, you're not sleeping. You're not in that recovery state of sleep. So then you wake up as tired as you were before you went to sleep because you haven't given your body the chance to rest and repair. So could we try a different coping mechanism for sleep? Because all that's doing is leading to the insomnia that lots of women suffer through perimenopause, but also just through life in general. When you get to bed and you've got a busy brain and you're like, oh God, there's so much to do and I'm so tired, but I'm wired, do you know? And I'll just use a glass of wine to help me get to sleep. And then that's actually counterproductive.
Yeah. And we don't want to tell people not to enjoy life.
No.
Like, these are joys in life, they really are. But sometimes for me, I sit down and I go, it's not worth it. I actually want to feel clearer. I actually want to have a fresh head. I actually want to have less anxiety. Like, it's a hard decision, but I know that wine's not going to help me tonight. But it's finding that balance, like not to say they need to stop it every night, but maybe you could stop it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, still have it Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and see if you notice a difference and then decide what works for you and still having that little bit. But just making the decision of what's going to serve you more as well. If it's going to make you feel better, it's worth it in some ways.
Conscious choice instead of habit.
Yeah. I feel as well, like when you do cut things down a little bit, when you do have it, you enjoy it so much more.
Definitely. And then I think you become appreciative of, oh, that was really nice. Like that one glass was really nice. I remember a client saying to me, oh, you'll be so proud of me. I had a glass and I really enjoyed it, but I didn't fall into the bottle because I was like, I really enjoyed that. And actually, I would only be pouring another glass out of habit. Whereas like she was like drinking a bottle of wine a night before that. And it took a long time. Do you know, it didn't just happen overnight. She didn't just stop that. But you're absolutely right. Her level of appreciation for when she did have it was completely different to just habitually drinking it. Like she was like, I'm drinking it like Ribena.
Which is very common. It's so common. There's probably lots of people listening to this that are like, oh God, they're talking about me. And there's nothing wrong with you, but it's just something you can definitely start to understand yourself a little bit more. It is so powerful. And we're all so different as well, that it's really important to do it for yourself and not just go with what's on the mainstream and how somebody else and what somebody else does when they've got their period. You see people have weird and wonderful drinks when they're at a certain month, and you're like, I don't have the time to make that. You do
No.
what suits you.
Or the willpower to down it.
Yeah. So for you, Gemma, who's someone who is like a woman in your life when you were younger that you looked up to and inspired you? Was there anyone that comes to mind?
So I think as a mum, definitely my mum inspired me, you know, to be the family matriarch, you know. But as a young girl, I think it was sporting icons like Sharon Davis, you know, that there weren't as many notable females then. So to see women out there doing it, like I remember watching the Olympics when they were in Atlanta, and because of the time difference, they were on like through the night, and sitting up so that I could see these female athletes compete. Not that, because we didn't have social media, you couldn't really follow them, and they weren't in mainstream magazines. It was only boy bands, you know, but to see them perform at the Olympics, I was just like, that is amazing. And those women, even though I didn't know who they were necessarily, but just to see them doing their thing and being these powerful women just totally lit the fire in me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I've loved this today. This is probably like one of my favorite podcasts so far. I love chatting about this stuff, and I'm so happy we found you and we've been able to bring you on and open up this conversation some more. But so thank you so much. But for anyone else that's feeling it like me, where can they find you?
So Instagram, if you are a coach or a PT or a Fit Pro and you're like, oh, I could do with a little bit more, then you'll get me at the Women's Health Mentor. And if you are a woman navigating her own health journey and you would like a bit more, you can get me at the Women's Health Coach, both on Instagram.
Amazing. I shall pop them in the description. I'll get you to send the books over that you've mentioned as well.
Yeah,
We'll put that all in the description so everyone can just explore these things so much more for themselves as well. But Gemma, you've been amazing. I knew you would be. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
You. Everyone else, thank you for listening. I hope you've loved that today, and I'll catch up with you all very soon.